Hello, I'm John Powell. This oral history session is being recorded on November 3rd, 2009, and our subject, our guest, is John Shabazz, who was a state representative for many years and currently a senior status federal judge, Wisconsin's Western District. Thanks very much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
And we're in the legislature a long time, 64 through 81, appointed by Ronald Reagan to the judicial office in 1981. We've got a lot of ground to cover.
All right.
Let's start out with a little of your background and why and how you got into politics.
Well, how far do you want to get back? Fact is, I was born in Milwaukee on June 25th of 1931. Graduated from West Alice Hale High School. During that period of time, was active in the forensics and the drama and the newspaper. I had a father that was a neighborhood lawyer, probably the best lawyer I've ever met. I knew at the age of 5 that I was going to be one, and coincidentally, that's the same year he taught me how to swim. The fact is that he threw me off the pier at one of the cottages that he bought for me. And so we always lived on Okauchee Lake during the summertime. And I lived there and worked at the usual jobs, caddying, Farmers Exchange, picking cherries up in Sturgeon Bay, and did all that type of stuff as a kid. We had two routes, a Sentinel route and a Journal route. They were not together at that time. One in the morning, one in the afternoon.
You did both?
Yes. Yeah. Well, he did. See, he'd tell me. He'd say, "When are you going to get a job?" Well, I said, "Dad, fine, I'll do it." So I'd go out and get a job. And then after that, I found out that it was a better job than if I do something else. And I worked at this store in Oconomowoc, and they paid me 33 cents an hour. You're giving me, this is background on what I'm going to be telling you. This is how I learned to be fiscally responsible. They paid me 33 cents an hour. I'd work 48 hours, and I would hitchhike back and forth between Okauchee, where we had our cottage, my dad did, on Elm Avenue, to Oconomowoc, and then back again at night. I got my first check and it was $13.85. I said, "Mr. Waletsky, 48 times 33 is $264 a day times 8. He says, "I know, but you're salaried." I said, "Well, what's the $13.85? Well, he said, "That's Social Security." I said, "What's Social Security?" So at that stage, I decided that I'm going to quit this job, and I went out and sold greeting cards, bought them for 50 cents a box, and sold them for a buck. And it was a singing salesman. I'd walk up and down the street saying, "I'm from Friendship Studios, and I've come to say that we have a card that'll fit for you in a perfect way." And people laughed their heck out. They thought I had a monkey on a string. So they bought. So having done all that, we came to high school, and I was active, as I said, in high school. And my father was very helpful, as was my mother. My mother is Harriet. My father's name was Cyrus. And we did live in West Alice. After my graduation from high school, we moved to New Berlin. And in between the time that we went to New Berlin, we remodeled our old farmhouse that he bought in that area. It was a farm, and we had about 168 acres. And good friends of my father, Charlie King and Laverne, his wife, taught me how to take care of animals, how to plow fields, how to take care of the baling of the hay, and so I became a farmer for a number of years.
This would be around 1950 then, somewhere.
Yes, that'd be about 1950. In 1953, I was at Camp Carson and was commissioned second lieutenant at that time, and that was the end of the Korean War. I got it on July 31st of 1953.
So you missed the Korean War.
I didn't miss it at all.
You-
Well, I tell you what happened. When we went to our camp at Fort Belvoir, I transferred. There in between that, I married. I married Kitty. We had two children, Scott and Jeff, who are still with us, and I had done already my 4 years at Wisconsin, and that was my first year of law. So because of the financial concerns, my father said, "You can be the hired man." So I was, and I was the hired man, and we got our room and room and board, so to speak. You know, we'd have eggs, we'd have beef. We also did lambs. That we had a sheep farm, and we did all that. So it was wonderful that I had that assistance, because our son son came along within the first year of our marriage. That's Scott, and everything was going fine. And then I got a letter. It said, "We want you now." And that was when they took me into active service.
Had you been in ROTC then?
Yes, so that's where I got my commission through ROTC at Camp Carson, Colorado, in that year '93. So this is now '94. And they said, "Come on, we need you." And Truman McNulty was a lawyer friend of mine who was in JAG, which is the judge advocate.
Judge
And-
Adjutant General.
Right, and he heard I was going. He says, "Why? We want you in JAG. We want you in JAG." I said, "Fine." He said, "But you'd have to serve 3 years." I said, "I'll serve 3 years." He said, "But I got 1 year of law left." And so he put in a request and they said, "No, they need you." So one Sunday morning in August, we put the bed on top of my 1946 club coupe. Patty says, "Why don't you speak clearly?" I said, "Well, I get so excited once in a while, I can't do that." But anyway, we put the son in the back seat and took the few pieces of clothing we had, and we drove out to Camp Belvoir, where I had to have another 6 weeks of training. And I kept explaining to the PMS&T that, really, I'm more of a lawyer than I am an engineer. He said, "No," he said, "all you have to do is know what this is about and be a good supervisor, and things will go well."
So this was an engineering outfit
Engineering.
that you went into?
961st Engineer Battalion.
So you had no, I guess that's the Army way, they just put you in where they need somebody.
Exactly. Well, yeah, and so that's where I was. And this is the point I was getting to. When you said about, did I miss Korea? 106 BOMAC. BOMAC was the abbreviation for our group, and we were 106, basic operations, and all of us put in a dollar or two to see the winner would get the pot when we came out with these assignments.
You mean who got the best assignment?
The worst.
Who got the worst assignment would get the pot, okay.
The worst assignment. And the worst assignment is what Phil White, an African American, and I, a good buddy of mine, and I got. Fort Leonard Wood.
Missouri.
The Korea guys were doing better off, so we split the pot. And I drove on to Missouri.
Fort Leonard Wood was, when I was in the Army, was known as Fort Lost in the Woods.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, okay.
But I figured
I took your line away, sorry.
Fort Lost in the Woods. And there we served for 2 years. And my wife and I and my son. I then got there and they said, you're not much of an engineer, are you? And I said, well, no. They said, well, then why don't you be our regimental trial counsel and adjutant? So I was then the assistant adjutant of the regiment and trial counsel. And worked at that all the time I was there. Before I was promoted to first lieutenant, we had our second child. And I guess we said to each other, you know, we got to get something out of this Army. Let's have a child. So we did. And
Free medical care.
yes, you're right. I became more of a socialist than I thought I would. So any event, we did that. And Jeff was born, and Jeff is now 53 and doing well with Dean Foods. So then we returned to Wisconsin, and I finished my last year of college at Marquette University and got a degree from Marquette. And I was the top in my class. There's a trick to that. When I got back, the dean said to me, you know, now that you're here, we've raised the requirements for graduation. You got to take 4 more credits than you. I said, that's not right. He said, I don't care if it's right or not, but you need to take 4 more credits. So I said, fine, I'll take 16 a semester. He says, no, you won't. You can only take 15. I said, how do I get those 4? He said, you go to summer school. I said, oh, okay, I'll take them in the first session. He said, no, you can't do that either. Only 2 credits each session. So I took 2. And I got those 4. So I didn't get everybody else, we all graduated. But I couldn't be in the bar association and become a lawyer until I was sworn in. And I couldn't get sworn in until I got my degree. And I couldn't get my degree till I took those 2 courses. So I took divorces and, coincidentally, Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. There weren't too many that knew what federal rules were all about. So we went to Madison one September morning, I think it was the 19th of September of 1957, and my dad arranged a private ceremony with with the Chief Justice, and I became a lawyer.
So you've been intending to be a lawyer since childhood.
Since I was 5.
Had you intended to go into politics?
Well, I found that out when I ran for student council and got beat 2-1. And I was going to be a politician and I'm going to learn the way of doing it. So I decided about in high school that I would be somewhere in government. And that's one of the reasons I took so many political science courses. I wanted to see what the enemy was doing. And we heard all about Harry Hopkins and the FDR and Social Security, and you know, you'd parrot back the answers so you'd get a good grade. And I couldn't wait to use it. Use it for the benefit of the, what I believe to be fiscally responsible reasons for government, the less government. And I was growing up with that and believed with that, and I still do. So anyway, where were we?
So you decided, what was your first foray into regularly elected politics then?
Well, I guess I got first involved in the year that I graduated, 57. They moved in, a group wanted to make New Berlin a city. And
Was it a village at the time?
it was just the
Not
town.
unincorporated.
The town of New Berlin with about 7,000 people. Great. What we wanted. We moved to be there. We liked that. So the group that asked me to help them was a group that was opposing this annexation type of thing. And so everything went fine except the day of the vote. The weather was so bad and the farmers couldn't get to their fields and they couldn't get out, and we lost by 44 votes and New Berlin became a city.
And that would then allow it to annex? That's what you were
Yeah.
worried about?
Yeah, they became a city. One of the first things they did was offer an ordinance that there could be no more livestock on the farms.
Livestock?
Livestock.
Oh,
Livestock.
gee.
Cats. Dogs. No, they were all right. But you didn't do that. They didn't want it that way. They wanted to make it an industrial community and a residential community. Well, they did finally come their ways because the first alderman had been former town chairman, and he understood that the farmers were still the most important group out there, and so that did not happen. But we hold, as I said, that recount. They asked me to do a recount, and at that recount, we had the votes counted, and I covered that. That was the first recount that I ever did, and we lost by 44 votes. And I was so entranced with getting it done, not even put up the expenses on behalf of the committee, and I'm still waiting for them to pay me back. We just went down. So that was
How
that.
much did they spend? Or you spend?
Oh, about $25 for the filing fee and something
that
like
was
that.
it, huh?
Yeah, that was about it.
Oh, for the recall.
For the recall. Well, not recall.
I mean the
Recount.
yeah.
Recount. Yeah, right. So along came 1958. Now we're up to 31 to 58. I'm 27. And the district attorney's office was always part-time. But they decided to make it full-time. And this was the first election for a full-time district attorney. Those who had the job were able to do their practice of law and do the district attorney job like you find many local municipal judges do at this time and still do in the rural areas. So I decided that I was going to run for the office. And Sam McConnell was the clerk of court, and he said, "John, you're a young fellow, why don't you run for district attorney?" And I came home and I said, "Dad, I'm running for district attorney." He said, "Who gave you that crazy eye?" I said, "It's Cam Connell." He says he's one of my best friends. Why would he lead you down that path? So we ran for district attorney. I campaigned all summer long in this whole Waukesha County, from Stone Bank to Muskego, all over the place. And I always say that there were 5 of us, and I finished 6 out of 5. I got 500 votes in the entire county. But before that, I also ran for alderman and lost that, and I came in second.
Now, if you campaigned so hard, why did you come in last?
Well, that's a pretty big county.
Yeah.
And, well, I'll tell you why. They were getting to that. I'll tell you why. I didn't have an organization. It was my wife and I. And didn't have any money to spend. Oh, yeah, I did sell my Pabst stock. and got about $600 and blew that down the rat hole. But you just couldn't do it. The name recognition just didn't go. And Shabazz, they could barely pronounce it. So in any event, 2 years later, I decided to run for the assembly. That would have been in
60?
Oh, not, was it 60? Well, yeah, I guess it would be 60. Yeah. And I finished third out of 3.
Was that in the primary or?
Yeah, there was a Republican primary. Vince Matthews was the Democrat that had the seat. I never even got to, I'd even got there. I was finished third out of 3. So I thought I'd better bide my time and start to build a following. So I became president of our local Lions Club and president of the West Allis JCs and active in the Red Cross and with the Republican Party, and then decided I'd miss running in 64. And so I ran, in 62,
and then you
go to 64. And that's where the party backed me. I got a fellow that came down from a new resident from Virginia, and he said, "Have you decided you want to win?" I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "Well, I'll handle your campaign for you." And he did. And he told me, how to campaign and how to build a group, a Whig in every precinct, everything that I, had never been accustomed to. And go to every event that comes down the pike. And we did. And when I went to the courthouse at the end of the voting and looked at the results, I was behind. And all that was left was Oconomowoc Lake and the town of Summit. I thought I had Oconomowoc Lake because they told me Oconomowoc Lakes only votes about 500 people. And only 4 vote Democrats, and they know who the Democrats were. So I figured I had a cushion there. And my opponent lived in Summit, and she wasn't favored too much in Summit. And so those 2 precincts came in, and I won by a smashing 51.2%.
Well, that was pretty good because that was the
Goldwater landslide.
Lyndon Johnson, 60% or something national.
Oh no! And I said to my guy, I go to all these coffee hours, and these are conservatives, these are realists. They ask me, what do you think about Goldwater? He said, you say he's a very nice man, and go out to the next topic.
What did you think of Goldwater?
I thought he was a very nice man. And I thought he did a great job. And I was certainly for Goldwater. And if they asked me, I said, I'm going to vote for him.
Do you think, did he make mistakes? Did he sound too extreme for the time?
I don't think he was extreme at all. But I
did
think
he sound that way?
He might have. I don't know why he lost. I don't know why he lost, except he yelled at the conductor of the train. And I was in that campaign too in high school. And I remember that. But I can't tell you why. The fact is that I guess the people weren't ready for him. They thought things were going well, and they decided...
So, who was it that came out from Virginia?
His name was Hav McKeel. He worked in a foundry in Milwaukee. And he was a recent resident of the Milwaukee area, but lived in New Berlin. And he had heard about me. And we went to a Republican conference that year, and he happened to be there and said, I understand you run for office before. He said, would you like to win? I said, yes. And so we put together a campaign.
Was he a professional campaign manager then?
No. No.
But he'd obviously been involved in campaigns
Other
before.
campaigns in Virginia. He was familiar with them. Yeah.
So you won. You go to Madison. And at that time, Republicans were in the majority.
No, we didn't. We lost by one. We were in the minority.
In 64?
Yeah, we lost one seat.
Oh, okay.
And we came in with one vote lacking of being a majority.
And Warren
but we-
Knowles, the Republican, was governor.
He was governor, and then we picked that seat up the following year in '66. And I was a candidate for caucus chairman, and I didn't get it. Then we came back in '68 again with a majority, and we lost that. And that's when I came back as the assistant floor leader. Freilich had been speaker, and he became the floor leader, and I became assistant. And when he left, I was then the Republican floor leader of the assembly for all those years until I was appointed by Governor Reagan.
Now, what was the assembly like, and were there surprises for you? Did you know what to expect?
Well, I said I read the rules. I knew the rules. I expected what would happen, so I understood the rule. I took them before me tweaking, and they knew it. I knew what to do through my poli-sci course. Just the opposite of what they told me. The philosophy that they taught, and I got in a group that was very active. And we worked very well together. And the whole legislature worked well together in those years. It was partisan, but the fact is it was still camaraderie. In fact, those were the best years of my life, excluding high school. But after that, and it was great when I left. I left. And I guess it got nasty after that. Very highly partisan. My friends that stayed tell me how difficult it was under that regime. And that's when they had all their troubles.
Now, so you'd served both in the minority and the majority.
Right.
Big difference?
Oh, absolutely. In the minority, you didn't have to do anything. In the majority, you did everything.
Well, you had to do. You were the
Minority
parliamentarian when you were in
That's
the
true.
minority. So you were kind of the go-to guy for the
And you
Republicans,
know,
weren't
there
you?
was and there was always that yelling and screaming about closed caucuses. Why do you have closed caucuses? So we opened our caucuses, and that wasn't a good thing, because a caucus that everyone thought was so bad was really a kind of a preschool thing. We would take a bill, we'd dissect it, we'd hear the committee report from the senior Republican on the committee that came out of committee, and we'd all discuss it. They'd ask all their questions, everything was fine. Well, they didn't want to do that in open. They wanted to figure it out for themselves. So it was a little bit more difficult leading them because, you know, as Kurt McKay said, you know, it's the worst thing you can have is have a $1 million surplus. He says, because you'll find 100 ways of spending it.
Curtis McKay was the majority leader at the time.
He did become, yes, he did.
But, so you found it more difficult working with an open caucus? Made it more difficult to...
Well, for leadership purposes, yes. Yes, for leadership purposes.
And the issues...
Because I don't know if it's fair to say that, but there was an ability to discuss them in caucuses and decide, you know, what looks good. We didn't have that when we had he put 5 of us together and they said that's a closed caucus. So, you know, you do that on your time off. And it did, I think, hurt. Well, it didn't hurt. I kept it along. It worked all right, but it was more difficult. I had to work harder, let's say it that way.
Well, with the open caucus, was there a lot of talk behind the scenes? I mean, calling people and one-on-one meetings and stuff, getting ready, you know, doing
Yeah,
it?
I did that. I started, because of that, I started that we would have groups, and we'd meet in each other's territories. And I would set up one education group. I'd put some of the Republican members on that I wanted it, and we'd set up a fiscal group. But this was all outside the main structure.
And you couldn't
And they
have-
could just do it No, that was.
And you couldn't have a majority of the caucus on any of this, because that would be a,
Well, I don't know. I
Meeting.
think it's when you take a vote. I think that stretched it. But then we would go to the people. Like I'd come down to Dousman, and I didn't like the highway bill. So I'd speak to the people at Dousman, and I'd bring in the rest of the members of my committee that was on the highways, and they would tell what they thought about the bill. And then the people would be there. A tea party, if you would. And we would do that. And I would always do it in McQuanago, Eagle,
now these were
Dousman.
community meetings.
community meetings.
You'd advertise them and invite everybody.
Well, I'd write them in a note, and I would visit each of my municipalities or towns or villages a couple of times every year. And I would always put that in the local paper, and people would show up to find out what it was all about. Sensenbrenner still does that. But I started it years ago because I figured it took me this long to get here. I'm going to stay. So you'd work with them. And it was so great. It was enjoyable. They were neat people. They were down to earth. They had town government.
Yeah, you're talking about your local government officials now.
Yes, yes. The towns were the greatest. The towns of Eagle, the town of McQuanago, town of Ottawa. They were just great people to work with, as were the rest of the people in the small villages. And you could really, I don't know, just different, great. You could bring them to you, and they knew they could count on somebody to be there, and it worked well.
Now, during your time in office, New Berlin became more urbanized, obviously, as
Yeah.
the whole Milwaukee area did. How
Yeah.
did that change things?
Nothing, because I knew it was happening. They were going to have the industrial park, and so with the industrial park, it just means I had to walk 3 times around the district in New Berlin than I did the first time around. So we kept it there. You go out and you meet all the people that are coming in. And it was something great about that. People would come out from down by the south side. The people that lived in the south side would come to New Berlin because we're right on 124th Street. And you'd go up and talk to the board. You'd say, "Hi, welcome, Reagan." They became Republicans. They joined you. And you said, "Would you handle my block this year?" And I'd always assign a block or something like that with the new people,
Now, this is largely people moving out from the city.
moving from the city of Milwaukee to New Berlin. Because there was some of the thoughts that our party had that, we're going to be gobbled up by the by Milwaukee. And I said, "No, you aren't. No, you're not. Just be honest with the folks and meet with them, make them welcome, and it's all that it takes."
Now, looking back, I'm sure the 60s will be labeled as the turbulent decade with the anti-war protests and everything. Did you find it that way? Obviously, you were a generation probably older than the college kids of the 60s. What was your take on that whole thing?
I didn't find it. I did not participate. I don't know if it was that. It was in the newspapers, but I don't know if it was in our area. We had kids that were away, and I remember the first one that was killed, and the whole town, the whole county came out. I don't think there was that. Where I had the problem was with Groppe. And you're familiar with that, I'm sure.
Father Groppe in Milwaukee, a very activist priest
Right.
who led demonstrations, in fact, took over the assembly chamber at one point.
Exactly. And he took it right over and shut it down. And I said to him, look, why don't you come out, see what we're doing in the hinterlands? So he did. He took me up on it. And he showed up with his troops at my home. And the police department just went nuts. They said, what are we going to do with this? What are we going to do with this? One guy even brought a German Shepherd. I said, put that dog away. In the closet, a little dog was barking, and I said to my wife, will you shut Heidi down? No! They think it's a German Shepherd. Terrible, isn't it? That's sick humor. But it was, we talked to them. We had time to spend. And but it was difficult times in that regard. That was the only march that we had on Georgia, if you will.
How many people did Grumpy bring out?
Oh, maybe a couple, maybe a 50 to 100. And we used our stings, they used our swings, and they saw our lands. And
So, and folks from New Berlin met them.
yeah,
And so you had, what, like a big picnic or something? Or?
no picnic. It was just the discussion.
Uh-huh.
Just a discussion. And I would say, you know, you can get a job. Can't you? They said, well, who wants to work for that amount of money? I said, and I couldn't say I did because that's self-deprecating. But the fact of the matter is, I said, lots of people do. I used Abraham Lincoln as a, you know, he was out cutting wood. They didn't like him either. I don't know if it made any difference, but at least we had given the opportunity to have them vent.
What did you think about, well, we're in the 60s, the Vietnam War then, and looking back on it?
I thought the Vietnam War was, at that time, difficult. I thought that if I was called, I'd be happy to have gone. And I believe that it took many lives that perhaps were not necessarily to be shed in that regard. But I supported the war, being a military person. I believe that when your country calls you, you go on and do it.
Looking back on it, still think it was a good idea?
Go back on it, I've never thought about it before, and I don't even know if I want to. I do know that Afghanistan is up there now, and I do believe that the president should provide those troops which are necessary to finish the thing along, and I perhaps would have the same comments that it related to Vietnam. And we did win Vietnam. Nobody knows it because that isn't the way the press is covered. But if you want to know about it, talk to Randa, Judge Randa, judge in the Eastern District of Wisconsin. He's still on the bench. He was there. He said, we won that Vietnam War.
In what respect?
In the fact that we won. He said, but they gave in while we were winning. The country pulled back on us. The department pulled back on us. But we had won. So, and I think you should. If you're going to go in there, you should go with the idea that it's right to be there, the right to assist those neighbors that need help, and decide that you're going to win. Now, I look at MacArthur. I remember I was in Nebraska with my father buying steers for the farm, and I watched MacArthur. Old military men never die. And I thought MacArthur was right. I thought Truman was wrong. I think that the generals here are right. I think that the president is wrong. In Vietnam, I think everybody was wrong. But the fact of the matter is, it ended up to be right.
The other issues of that's what
But those issues we never discussed. There were
no, that wasn't the state
the only
issue.
issues were that Midge Miller would hop up every once in a while with some type of a squirrely resolution.
Democratic Representative Madison, who was very anti-war.
Right.
The other issues, though, may be obscured from the 60s. There were some big things that happened in the 60s and in the early 70s, some of the big issues.
Well, I guess I didn't participate in those.
Moving into the 70s, merger of the UW system, for example,
All right.
which Governor Patrick Lucey pushed through.
That's right.
What did you think of that?
Bill Steiger and I didn't think it was a good idea.
He was at that time still in the legislature,
Right.
later congressman.
Right, we didn't think that would be a good idea. We liked the way we had it.
Do you think it was, looking back, do you think it was a mistake?
No, I think it's wonderful. My children, my daughter Emily has gone there and
To-
uses it.
To Madison?
She's going right now.
To Madison?
Yeah, she goes there now. I think what we wanted is to have these particular schools, but we wanted to teach the trades. There weren't trades being taught. That was the division. That was the only problem I had. I said, look, there are those that really aren't interested in the general subjects that are taught at the universities. So let's make stronger vocational schools, but don't make them secondary colleges as you have.
We have the state technical college system,
Yeah.
which we had then.
Yeah.
Though I guess it wasn't as big, it's been expanding.
Well, substantially.
Everything has.
You've seen the buildings. We have a great big one in our hometown of New Berlin, and it's a huge one, and lots of children go there.
Assessing it now, do you think that the merger was good? And the
I
way
think
the
it
system-
worked out well.
Okay. Is there enough specialization between the campuses then? I know that the
I
former
don't
university system campuses were kind of specialized, you know.
I don't know about the specialization anymore. All I know is that my son is at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. All of his life, when he began about 10, he says, Dad, I'm going to be a lawyer like you and Grandpa. And I said, fine. So he graduated from high school, and he said, we had career days today. That was this last spring. I said, fine, did you hear all about the law that your father's been telling you? No, we heard about accounting. And do you know what those CPAs make? So he's now in the School of Business at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee.
Now, this has been a criticism that many have raised, that the rewards for young people are to go into finance and banking, not engineering, not law, and that this has been bad for the country.
I don't know. I don't know what you can do that. How you can. I don't think you can even have Obama require that they have those type of quotas for the. I think it goes fine. You do it what they want to do. I don't think it's hurting him. I think a kid should go where he wants to go, what he wants to follow. I'm not going to push him, and I don't believe anyone else should either. So whether they're going journalism, my daughter is full-time supervisor of daycare at a Lutheran school, and that's why she is moving on with preschool at the vocational school, which we don't call vocational schools anymore. I still do, because she wants to get fully accredited rather than just the associate degree, so she can proceed. But I think that's to the individual. Some of them want to be ditch diggers, some want to be carpenters, somebody want to be a doctors. I think they know from career days what it's all about. So why should we criticize those that take subjects that they don't want?
Well, let's talk Pat Lucey's style. You were minority leader, I believe, at the
Yeah.
time Pat Lucey was governor.
All right.
And he pushed through he wanted to push through cabinet form of government.
That's right.
Direct
I told you
appointment.
about that.
Yeah, so how did that go?
Well, he asked if
He called you
he
in.
called me in, asked if I would be able to assist him in getting a cabinet form of government. I said, no, I don't believe in a cabinet form of government, and I didn't at that time. And I said, I think that the present cabinet government, the present form is good. He said, yeah, but what about the VA secretary? I said, well, you know, you always get somebody that you're not interested in. He said, and he said to me, he said that he would like me to at least look at that one cabinet position and find another way of changing it. And I said, well, fine. And then I said to him, you know, I've been thinking about this M&E that we just passed.
It's the machinery and equipment
Exemption.
From property tax
Right.
for manufacturing.
And I said, you know, Republicans have worked for this forever. And Democrats always stopped it. And you were in favor of that and signed the bill. I always remember, and I said, how could you do that? That's wonderful you did. I said, what do you, he said, well, John, that's like Nixon going to Red China. That was his comment. So there's a warm spot for Pat Lucey. I thought he was a good governor, great governor.
Now, he failed to get cabinet
He didn't get it.
governor's appointment of veterans and DNR.
Yeah.
Later on, Tommy Thompson did. Was that a good idea when Tommy got it?
I have no comment.
That was after you were out.
I would not vote for it.
That was after you were out.
I was there. I don't care what they did. I care what they did afterwards, but there's not much I can do about it, can it?
Looking back on your legislative career, were there any big surprises, any big disappointments, and well, what are you most proud of from that era?
The fact is that we got through being fiscally responsible, that our programs at that time were reasonable, that many of the items that were offered were not a part of the legislation which was ended up. It was that what I was concerned about. And I do think we did make inroads. And I do believe that perhaps they're eroded now, but I felt comfortable with the state of Wisconsin when I left. I don't feel comfortable with the state of Wisconsin today. I felt comfortable when Ronald Reagan was president. I don't feel comfortable about our country today with this fella that is now president. And I don't think I'll ever be.
What about Bush? George
I believe
W.
he
Bush.
did what he could. I think that he probably did it in the wrong way. But the biggest problem was, what did you think about Nixon? And Freilich voted for impeachment and lost his seat in Congress.
Yes, well, we want Harold Freilich is still a judge in Appleton.
Yeah.
We'd love to get him for one of these oral reports, and he was on the House Judiciary Committee.
Well, I hope that my legacy isn't contained in what I would like now. I wouldn't hope that this whole article addresses those concerns that I brought to your attention, other than the fact is that I am somewhat reluctant to in any way support the present administration.
And what did you think of Nixon?
I thought he was a good president. I thought he was a darn good president. I thought he did wrong, but I think the punishment was overreaching.
Do you think he deserved impeachment?
No.
No. Harold Freilich voted for it, as you say.
Right.
And most experts say that's why he lost for re-election in a Republican district the next.
That's what I told you. Yeah, that's right. I mean, he was the president, and so there was a burglary, and things were taken, and he paid for it.
Well, famously, he said, if the president does it, it can't be illegal.
Well,
The
that's
president
wrong.
is above the law, isn't it? And Bush said the
And he's
same
wrong in
thing.
that. He's wrong in that. He's wrong in that. But Obama's doing what's above the law, and he's not preaching it. But he's doing it, and it's going to catch up with him sometime. But it isn't going to be an impeachment. It's going to be in Vermont today, New York today, in New Jersey today.
There's an election today. This is election day.
You're absolutely
Not
right.
in Wisconsin. We don't.
And I
well,
can't
I guess
wait
there are a
to-
few referenda in Wisconsin.
And I don't think that we're not going to the polls, are we?
Not in Madison.
Well,
There-
where are we?
I don't know. There may be a few referenda or something. It's in my. But anyway, you're right. Virginia, New Jersey, Vermont,
Right.
congressional and Senate and governor.
Roosevelt was above the law. Look at all the programs he passed in his first term of office, which were found unconstitutional. So I don't know what this above the law means. It's a good way of hurting a person by saying, you're above the law. No one is above the law. We know that. Nobody even should say that. And I think it's tarring somebody with the wrong brush.
The left now is clamoring for, calling Cheney a war criminal.
I haven't heard that yet.
Well,
I haven't heard that, but I don't listen to them. I got enough trouble with the right without listening to the left as well.
well, let me get to that. You were noted as a conservative. We've used that word.
I don't ever call myself a conservative.
Because that's my question. These words seem to have lost their meaning to some extent.
No, that's right.
So how describe yourself and today's people that are labeled conservatives? How
Well, I think a conservative should be that which Reagan did. I think it should be the best that you can provide to your constituents at the lowest possible cost, allow you to have freedom without the regulatory controls that I just went through signing a mortgage for my daughter, which just doesn't make sense anymore. I think government is foreign to the people. And so we always believed in less government. We always believed in a firm and strong national defense. We also believed that the government should be just. As the same as I say when I talk about rule number 1 of the Federal Rules of Civil Proceedings. Take care of each case that comes along with the least cost possible, making it just and inexpensive.
Now you said you have some trouble with today's right? People on the right? What's
Well, I don't have any trouble with that at all. That isn't the point. I just don't think there are enough of them.
Oh, okay.
Good Lord! Now, wait a minute. I hope that I didn't mumble my words that much that would allow you to even think that. I'm saying that the conservatives are not in numbers enough, but I'm thinking that they will be as time goes on, when they find out, the populace finds out how bad things are. There's no question about it that there aren't the few Republican leaders the number of Republican leaders that there should be.
Why do you think the Republicans lost the Congress in 2006? Is it over Iraq or?
No,
the
I think
economy?
that there's a general dissatisfaction, like that happens. I think historically, you don't hold on forever. They had it long enough, and let's try a new toothpaste.
So looking back, how would you summarize your career in the legislature? As you say, apparently the state was solvent when you left the
What
legislature.
choices do I have?
The state was solvent when you left the legislature.
True, that's good.
That's what you were
Right.
proud of.
That's good.
Anything else in particular?
Can't think of it.
Because the state doesn't seem to be too solvent today.
That's what Judge Doyle thinks. Jim Doyle thinks too. No, I don't have it. I did what I did. I think that I'm happy with the legislation that we were able to defeat. And
Looking back on it, any vote that you regret or would change if you could go back? And
I've often thought of that. I don't think so. There may be one or two, but there were thousands of votes.
you know,
But today, they're all over the net. I would read a bill when it came before us. I didn't read them all because they think I read them all, but I never even saw the light of day. I'd read them. I understood them. And I would make a decision then and there. And those decisions never wavered. And they say, well, you don't want to be obstructed by the facts. I said, I know the facts. I've read the bill. I know what it says. And then I'd look at the guys on the floor and I'd said, Leo, this is your bill. Have you read it? He says, it's bad enough work passing it, but it's bad enough passing the bill than reading it too. On the floor. They didn't read the bill.
this is one of your own members.
No, that was on the St. Croix side of the aisle.
Okay.
No, Leo, nice guy. But he says, bad enough, he says, it's bad enough for voting on him, he says, without reading them too, is what he said.
So, how did the legislature change? How has it changed now?
Well, in all honesty, it changed inappropriately. I'll leave it like that. I can't judge how it is now, but from those discussions that I have had with present legislators and others who are leaving voluntarily, it's a lot different than the years that I was in the legislature. The problem is that the legislature has become too large. It's become too large with too much staff, which gives the representatives the opportunity not to read the bills at all. It was in the past, not all of us read all the bills, but at this point in time, it's too much. The dollars which are spent on campaigning, I can't believe the dollars that I hear being spent. I don't know if it's true, but they tell me for one seat you might spend $1 million.
It's happened.
And I look at as just unfortunate that you have to do that. And when you do that, and the gains are so great, you sometimes don't legislate with your hearts and what your beliefs are, and you legislate like, what is it for me? I'm not saying they do that, but with some of the stuff that comes out, they have to. One thing, you gotta have mandatory insurance, right? But mandatory insurance has to be by everybody. The full policy, as I understand it, is. How do these kids have the money to even pay insurance? I guess maybe that's a way of getting them off the road. Now, there are many of them that I could cite, and I don't want to because I'm not prepared to entirely run down each piece of legislation that I have difficulty with.
As we speak, the legislature is, I think they're still considering, I don't think it's got final passage, a bill that would require mandatory auto insurance.
That's right.
I understand Wisconsin is one of only 2 states that doesn't have it now.
Well, they can have it mandatory, but they don't, for the other guy, you put in collision insurance. You don't have to do your own car. I wouldn't have any objection to collision insurance. But the fact of the matter is, as I understand it, it's for the whole thing. It's like Obama saying you gotta have an insurance policy for your health or we're gonna fine you for $2,000. Have you heard about that one? It's still in the bill.
So you'd like a part-time legislature?
No
Like
question
it,
about it.
like it was when you started?
I think it would be good to have it that way. You're closer to your constituents. You should have their understandings and you should be a part of the community. You come up here, you're not, you know. And the fact is that it's not conducive to having, I think, appropriate legislation. And the dollars itself that is spent on campaigns and spent on the offices of the legislators is just more than I think that is necessary.
Part of the reason for the huge amounts spent are that re-election becomes the #1 goal of the legislator, is that?
You said it better than I did.
How do you de-escalate? Well, one thing would be going back to a part-time legislature, but do you have any other ideas of how to de-escalate from this?
No.
I should relate this, now I don't know if you want to get into this, but of course in Wisconsin we elect judges, and we've had judicial campaigns
That's right.
for the state Supreme Court of $1 million.
That's right. I understand that.
What should we do about that?
Whatever the people decide, and I don't believe in campaign financing for anybody.
Campaign, that is,
Public financing.
the rationale usually is that according to Supreme Court rulings, U.S. Supreme Court, you can't, taking public money, you can obligate people to spending limits, for example, if they take public financing. That's why public financing is needed, some of the people.
Oh, I see.
And that you couldn't put on limits
Well,
without.
that's like I need an overcoat when I go outside today so I don't get cold. I don't believe in the government financing campaigns. I believe it's for the people to finance campaigns.
But organizations that are wealthy,
Organizations, so you get a wealthy organization.
can't they drown out everybody by
No.
buying $1
So
million
the
worth?
government should drown out instead of the organizations? The governments should get out of the health business because they're expensive and they leave it to the government? I don't believe in that governing. I never will. I think it's completely wrong.
Should we change? Do you like the system of electing judges that we
Sure,
have
I
in
do.
Wisconsin? Okay.
Sure.
You're appointed, of course, in the federal
Exactly,
system.
absolutely.
You have I think Wisconsin, some people say Wisconsin should go to appointing
Mhm.
to
Good.
avoid this mess of the $1 million.
I don't
what
think
they see
you'll
as-
avoid the mess. You're gonna have guys like that bird from Illinois that's gonna, find a guy on the street and hand him a judgeship. You don't want that. And you have a commission. And who's on the commission?
Exactly.
Members of parties. The people should decide.
Should they in federal elections then? Would you like
Well,
federal judges
you
elected?
can't violate the Third Amendment of the
No, you have to
Constitution.
amend the
If you
Constitution.
want to amend the Constitution, I suppose it's fair to do it. But I do think that the independence of the federal judiciary is something that is important to keep. I do believe that there should be that right to decide things without the concerns that the legislature is going to cut off your salary. And I don't know. I think the best thing is said if you just read the Constitution and listen to those people like the Madisons, the Jeffersons, who founded this nation of ours, and how they believe. And they believed right.
Let's talk about, being a judge is kind of mysterious to most of us who never have such an opportunity. How do you be a judge? First of all, how did you learn that you were appointed to the federal judiciary?
Well, I was called by Senator Reagan on
President Reagan.
President Reagan. I was called by, well, he was the governor, President Reagan. And when I was meeting with Governor Dreyfus, at the time we were building a budget, and I got a phone come from my office, and my secretary said, the president called. And I said, the president of what? And she said, the president of the United States. I said, tell him I'll call him back. And she said, no, he'll call you back. I said goodbye to Governor Dreyfus, got home at 1 o'clock, and the president of the United States called and said, Mr. Shabazz, I would like you to be judge, federal judge for the Western District of Wisconsin. Is that acceptable to you? And I said, yes, and I'll do a good job.
Must have been quite a shock and a big surprise for you.
I don't know if it was a surprise. I kind of thought that there was a chance. There were 5 of us in the swing, and my name was up there, and as the out of that group, that I kind of thought it would happen. But yes, I was overwhelmed for at least a week or so.
Is that normal procedure for the president himself to call nominees?
I've never heard of it before.
Well, I wonder why, you don't know why he happened to call you?
Well,
Was he still president-elect then?
no, he was president of the United
Right,
States,
yeah.
and it was in his first year.
Yeah.
You know, it was almost the end of his first year. He called me in December of '81, I think it was. And he had been president for 1 year. And I don't know if that is done with others or not, but the fact is, when he ran in '76 here in Wisconsin, several of us were very active in his campaign. We didn't get 1 vote, not one, at the conference.
Talking about delegates.
Delegates, 1 delegate at the, and in fact, I even refused to go.
To the convention?
Yes, yeah.
Well, now, your term on the bench, you may end up being best known for the fact that you cleaned up the backlog when you got on the bench. At the time you got on the bench, the Western District of Wisconsin had a huge backlog and waiting time. Tell us about that.
Yes, we did, and what I did is to provide a preliminary conference for each and every case, except the pro se's, that I had on the docket. And we did about, half an hour apiece. And I did that for my first month, assigning trial dates. And we followed those trial dates. And some of them said, that's too much. I said, too much? That's too fast. I said, too fast. I said, your case has been out there for 2 years. What are you telling me? It's too fast. So we did that. And I would schedule 3 trials each week. And at the end of about 1.5 years for 2 years, there was no more backlog.
Well, the reports were that you really cracked the whip over the lawyers.
They tell me that.
You want to delay, as you say, you don't want much time, you really.
If you can't make this date, how about an earlier one?
So would you agree with that assessment, that you...
I wouldn't say crack the whip. I think you can talk to them. Those that were prepared and ready thought it was great. But those who didn't do their homework and didn't come on time, as some people do, they had some difficulties, perhaps. But I thought that it was even-handed, and at least I tried to make it even-handed, and to take care of some of those concerns that they had. But I didn't ever want to change a trial date unless there was an emergency involved.
Now, those of us who haven't been on the bench, and very few have, it seems kind of mysterious. It's difficult to really put yourself in the place of what it's like to be a judge, federal or state or whatever. Now, most of your cases are civil, is that correct? You don't have a
No,
lot
I
of
think,
criminal.
we had a lot of criminal cases.
What's the
Oh,
mix, do you?
yeah. I never thought what the mix is, but maybe criminals may have been between 15 to 20% of it, and we had a lot of pro se cases. I never did the statistics because it didn't make any difference.
Is there a huge, well, I was gonna ask that, there must be some difference between handling a criminal and a civil case, or?
Well, yeah, it's beyond reasonable doubt in a criminal case. The fact is, it's a preponderance of the evidence in a civil case. There's a 12-member jury in a criminal case where there can be only 6 in a civil case. The issues certainly are different. I mean, rape and failure to sign a proper affidavit are fields apart.
Yeah.
And we do have a period of time with which the criminal cases have to be tried, and we just follow that. And they know that.
Do you have any preference, kind of cases that you?
Preference of cases? Any case that's well tried. I don't have a preference.
So if the lawyers do a good job?
Everything goes swell. It helps the judge, and they're there to do that. And we expect them, and we have a great bar association. Our Dane County Bar Association is just great. They are very competent lawyers. They are hard-working lawyers, and they do a real good job when they come before me. And they always, well, not always have, I mean, in recent years. And it's just a pleasure to preside when you have that type of assistance.
So overall, has it been enjoyable to be a?
I don't know, I never say enjoyable. They say you're gonna stay, how long are you gonna stay? As long as you enjoy it. I said, I don't know if I can say enjoyable, it's fulfilling. I want to use that word. Enjoyment is something like going to a Badger game or seeing Star get beat. I mean, Favre,
Sounds like you're a football fan.
football. I still got my season tickets, and went to the Iowa game and went away just excited, enjoyed. Okay. After a trial, it's not an enjoyment. Putting a man away for 30, 40 years, there's not enjoyment in that. Having people found guilty and sentencing them, there's no enjoyment in that. It's fulfilling, and it's something that you have to do. And regardless of the thoughts that you might have on it, the law is the law.
You ever have any second thoughts, second guess yourself over a sentence or something like that?
Never.
No? How do you set about? You've got let's say it's a criminal trial. I know now there's strict federal sentencing guidelines.
That's correct.
Is that those were put in since you went on the bench?
That's right.
Were those a good idea?
I didn't like them because I wanted to use my but I thought I could do the law myself without that help. And I didn't want to be regimented into those guidelines. I still don't like it, but it doesn't bother me anymore. I don't know how I say I like it, it bothers me. The fact is, you've got them. They're helpful. I mean, a guy steals a loaf of bread. That's easy, right? But the guy steals $1 million. Or the guy rapes a person. And there's a sentence that can be from 5 years to 50. The judge then has to pick something out. Well, these guidelines pick it out for you. They show you what the circumstances might be, and based upon the circumstances, this is those parameters which you are required to follow.
Do you ever disagree with them? Wish you could go beyond?
Well, all the time, but I don't. But I follow them.
Yeah.
I follow them. That's the law. That's where I have the biggest deal of difficulty. Where judges decide cases on what they want to do rather than what the law requires them to do. I believe that the law should be interpreted as it is written, as should be the Constitution, And regardless of the way you believe it should be done, go to the legislature and change it. But don't do it on the bench.
Do you think Congress should ease up on those guidelines, or?
Well, they don't give them, it's a sentencing commission.
Ah, okay.
No, I think that they're dropping them too low. They're making them lower now.
Hmm.
They started out pretty good. Now they're shaving them back.
It's in the news, it has been for years, that the national prison population.
Well, sure, we
Is
knew that
now-
coming in.
Yeah.
That's why I found them unconstitutional to begin with. Barbara and I both did.
The sentencing guidelines?
Yeah, but we were overruled with only Scalia voting with us, so that's that.
You're talking about Barbara Crabb, the other
That's right.
federal judge from
That's
this
right,
district.
Judge Crabb.
So a suit was brought against them in your court, against the sentencing guidelines.
When the suit wasn't
Not a
brought,
suit, but.
just we wouldn't follow them.
Uh-huh.
We wouldn't follow them. What I did in the beginning, I said, here's the guideline. And now here's the sentence that it should be under the law. Because it's a violation of the law. And she did the same thing. So it was easy to re-sentence. There was a lot of them, but the fact is we then gave him the alternate that we said we would.
The Congress and state legislatures have been spending the last 30 years getting tough on crimes,
Oh, yeah?
especially drugs,
Yeah.
increasing the penalties, add-on penalties and so forth. Some of that was going on when you were in the legislature. Now we have more people locked up per capita than I think any country in the history of the world.
Probably.
Is that a good idea?
Sure.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do with them? Give them a merit badge?
The press right now seems to be decriminalizing marijuana, saying you've got
Sure they
thousands of people unnecessarily locked up.
That's right. That's right.
And your take on that?
I don't think you should decriminalize marijuana. In fact, they are changing it somewhat, and you just follow. When the guidelines change it, you follow it. And they say, well, this is for medicinal purposes. That's what the alcoholic keeps telling us too. I find no reason to allow that type of product to be on the market.
Do you ever feel in some kind of constraints as a district court judge? I mean, you're the trial level judge, and of course the appeals court and the Supreme Court can overturn you. And
Not only constrained by the law. If I miss the law, I deserve to be reversed or remanded. to
other
the
than
trial.
cleaning up the backlog, what are you going to be remembered for on the bench? Any particular landmark case, or what do you remember from your time on the bench?
Landmark cases, there really aren't any at the district level. Those landmark cases, the ones that I believed in most, I was reversed. I opposed this late term abortion, where you take the child out about the hour before it's born by its neck and kill it. And I was upheld by the appellate court in Chicago, but then it went to the Supreme Court, and we had a judge that just went the other way.
So how do you feel about it when you're overturned? I mean, there's nothing you can
As
do
I
about
asked,
it.
as I asked Gildy, what do you do about this? He says, well, life goes on. You put another can of beans on the shelf. You forget about it. You don't live in the past. You live in the past by finding out what the past has done and follow what's in the past as to the law and the Constitution. But it goes, when you're reversed, you say, well, I did something that I'm not going to do wrong the next time.
So out of your time on the bench, are there other cases or things that stand out in your mind that might be of interest to the future?
I thought of that. I've had that question asked a number of times. I've never lost for an answer. But I don't have one here. We tried a lot of cases. I can't tell you which was the best tried or what was the best result. all the results that have not been appealed were just. I have to believe that. And there are some cases which I can remember that I have understanding of at this point that is so simple in nature that it wouldn't, nobody else would care about it. A guy from Park Falls, he had a client that was picked up for drunken driving. The Department of Transportation took away his driver's license and sent him to school. The school for driving had a picture of Jesus on the wall. He objected to the fact that this was a violation of church and state, and that he was being discriminated against. The trial for the plaintiff lasted about a half an hour. The attorney for the plaintiff put his client on the stand and said, "Bill, where were you where did you go for your training?" And he said, "This hospital." And he said, "What was on the wall?" He said, "Jesus Christ." "And what training were you giving you there?" Those things that tell us the Lord shall be with us, and things of that nature, as well as the other facets that are necessary to stop you from drinking again. Well, then the defense came up. And there were at least 5 county agencies involved from each one, the different county, because they all had those same programs. And they all tried to give up testimony as to why it should not be a violation of church and state. Well, the jury came in, and it's very unusual. They came in without a verdict. You get that in criminal cases many times. Not many times. But it was the only time I had one where they did not reach a unanimous verdict. So I said, okay, I'll see you next Monday. We'll start the case over again, because that was my alternative. And they all blanched. So by that time, they had got the state of Wisconsin to eliminate that concern that this fella had about having religion.
They changed the venue of the
Not
class
the
or something?
venue. They took out religion in the training, in the curriculum, I guess I should say. They just took it out and said, we won't do that anymore. That was an interesting case.
So that made it moot at that point?
Yeah. Well, I didn't have to try.
Yeah. So was that a successful outcome?
I think so. The parties agreed.
And so this was a civil case,
Yes?
6-member jury,
Yes.
and they couldn't agree.
They couldn't agree.
Were there other civil cases that seemed to be that difficult for a jury, or criminal cases?
Not many. We always used to get unanimous verdicts. I think you're in the middle of a trial, and the witness says something that the witness was told cannot be said in front of the jury because of its import and the fact that there's no grounds for the statement, and then you probably a mistrial. And I had one guy that was in 3 of them, and I said, you know,
He was in 3 mistrials.
3 mistrials.
As a witness?
No, as a lawyer.
Oh.
As a lawyer. I said, you know, this is your 3rd mistrial. He says, yeah, and he said, I wasn't the fault of any of it, and he wasn't.
Oh.
Dick Summer, never remember, I'll always remember that.
How was he, one of his witnesses did something?
Well, yeah, you know, the guy would get up and say something out of context, which was not relevant. He couldn't shut him off. He told him a story that wasn't, was just not available, and for the jury to hear, and it would have prejudiced the jury if I had let it stand.
You must have been not pleased when you had to call a mistrial and start over.
Days a day. If I try this one or try that one. We just kept trying them. We tried them. Didn't make any difference. That's your job.
Do you, would you recommend a young person going into politics today?
Sure. If he knew what he was doing.
Even with the apparently bitter partisanship and million-dollar campaigns and all this kind of stuff?
Absolutely, I think he should.
Do you think that discourages
I have
people
no
from
idea.
going into
I have
politics?
no idea. I have no idea.
If one of your sons or your daughter said, I want to run for office,
Go ahead.
would you help them?
Here's the plan.
You'd get in there and help them, right?
Darn right. Well, I can't now.
Well, yeah, well, you're still, yeah, you can still be getting cases.
I can say, Patty, here, give this to the kids.
Tell your wife to pass it along, huh?
And she's very active too. She was, when Bob Caston was in the Senate, she was a member of his staff, and then he moved on for congressman, and she served with him for a couple of terms also. So she's very, and my mother-in-law, Esther Lockhart, was a strong conservative, and we got to be awfully friendly. So friendly that I married her daughter.
So finally, if somebody's listening to this, watching this 20 years from now, 100 years from now, what got a message for posterity?
Do your job and do it well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been I've enjoyed it a lot.
I have too.